When was the last time that a Nigerian parent apologized to you? Actually, let's scratch that completely. Let's scratch parent. When was the last time that an older Nigerian, somebody in their mid-50s to 60s upwards, when was the last time they ever said sorry to you after they did something really bad? When? And I don't mean coming into your room and asking if you're hungry or what you want to eat. I also don't mean going out and coming back with food or a material thing and not addressing the actual issue. I'm asking, when was the last time that anyone in that demographic looked at you and apologized? For a lot of us in our generation, the answer is actually never. A lot of people don't know what that feels like. A lot of people in my generation and younger generations have just had to navigate situations where nothing like that ever happens, like an apology never comes. And they just move on with their lives and work towards maintaining this facade. There's a lot of work that goes into donning this mask, like pushing certain feelings down and acting like they're not there. Acting like the absence of something, the absence of an apology, like it didn't do something to you, like it didn't break you. Acting like you've never wondered how different your life would have been if that one incident from your past was ever addressed properly and apologized for. There's a lot of work that goes into it, and I feel like a lot of us do this work. It's actually a problem. And it's actually crazy. This is something that comes up in conversations that I have with a lot of people around my age. And in this video, we're going to talk about it because I think that it's extremely important that we create environments where we can talk about these things, unpack them, and try to figure out and come to terms with how to move on. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, it's Dimma here. You guys have been enjoying me talking, so today we're going to yap again. Today we're going to be talking about Nigerian parents and the apology gap. To be honest, I struggled trying to figure out what to name this video, but a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about in this video, it's not just very specific or peculiar to Nigerian parents, okay? I think that a lot of this just applies to boomers in general, but I think that a lot of us who live in certain types of cultures, different types of cultures can relate with and to some of the things that we're going to be talking about in this video. A lot of us cannot even imagine the concept of a Nigerian parent or a Nigerian elder apologizing to us. This is so embedded in our culture, in our systems, to the point that people around our age are actually willing and ready to argue and fight on social media to defend that the absence of it doesn't pose an issue, that they are very, very, very much okay, when the truth is that, honestly, they are not okay. And they might think that they are okay, but then the way they go on ahead to treat other people and handle certain situations speaks to the fact that they are not okay, irrespective of the fact that they think that they are a lot of the time. I've had these conversations. I've seen some arguments come up on social media. I've seen people talk and they say things like, oh, we're good. Like, it's not a big deal. We're actually not good without it. For a lot of people, it takes them getting into relationships to actually understand that they have mommy issues or that they have daddy issues. A lot of it is always around them never being apologized to, or in general, just how we are sometimes treated or groomed to react to certain situations as children. For a lot of other people, it takes them having children and navigating some of the complex emotions that arise when their children do very specific things to realize that they actually never healed from something that they didn't have, from this lack, they never healed from it, and they begin to find that they struggle to give what they know is theoretically right. It's very difficult when you've really never known a thing. You talk to a lot of people and they will tell you that they grew up in households where at most it was half apologies. The apologies are just thrown at you, Oh, sorry that happened to you. Sorry you feel that way. I didn't mean it like that. The apologies are always structured like this, and there's never anything that addresses the impact that certain things might have had, even when it was not intended. It's also never a well-rounded thing where even if you didn't mean it like that, you acknowledge that you went about it in a way that fundamentally did something to the person in question who has raised an issue. It's never really like that, because I also feel like a big part of it is them feeling that they lose something the minute they admit certain things. For a lot of people, there was never a full "I am sorry," or "I was wrong," or "I didn't think about it like that. It was never my intention. I'll try to do better." A lot of people really never had that. So even when you do a poll sometimes and you hear from people who say, "Oh, they apologize sometimes," the apologies are always somehow. I feel like a lot of people have also found themselves in situations where when they are determined and they raise it, they are immediately met with, "After everything I've done for you, do you know who you're talking to? How dare you have these feelings? I am your parent. I did my best." There's hardly ever any introspection. I don't know why I'm laughing, but it's actually a tale as old as time for a lot of us. But I know that a lot of you can relate to what I'm saying. In a video I did recently where I was talking about parenting as compensation, if you've not seen that video, please go watch it. But there was a video that I did about like lies that society would typically tell us, women especially. In that particular video, I made the point that the response of, "Oh, I did my best," a lot of the time actually just stems from the fact that these people were raised in an environment where it wasn't even acknowledged that they had emotions. So for them, the fact that you're even able to bring it up is progress, because for them, like, what is an emotion? So I think that is part of the reason why they tend to respond the way that they do in situations like that. I think that is extremely important at this point, however, to actually explain that our parents were harmed first, especially going by the last point that I made. A lot of times when this thing is being unpacked, people reference colonial era rule. And this is right, because a lot of our parents went to schools, institutions, churches, where the white man had to adopt very specific tactics in order to keep them in order. Especially when you're trying to convince certain people that they are a certain type of thing or that they are less than, they put all kinds of measures in place to ensure this. And a lot of it was just this system that did not allow for a lot of things. But the truth that I'd also just really like to highlight is that even before the white man came, if you read certain things, you will see that just culturally, we already had a very strong hierarchy that ensured that things were just never acknowledged or attended to, especially like in real time or in a way that really highlighted the fact that you were an individual with very specific needs. So we're going to get into why this exists, but I'm also not justifying any of the things that stem from the fact that it exists, okay? Because two things can be true. This is just going to be me bringing context as to why some things exist, why I feel like a lot of them are the way that they are in the first place. Because I think that at least understanding this will give some of us a map, right, that is going to be very, very helpful when it comes to navigating some of the more difficult things we feel when it comes to this particular topic. In my opinion, the honest to God truth is actually that our parents were harmed first. Anything that we're not receiving from them, just know that in a lot of situations, they went without those things. For a lot of us, we're actually even able to, in situations, say, "Oh, we wanted this from you. We tried to communicate that we wanted this, but you never acknowledged it." We're able to say things like this at certain points, at least. For them, okay, they grew up in environments where it was frowned upon to have emotions. Like, they observed these things and inherited it. Like, what is an emotion? So the fact that we're even able to say, "Oh, we hoped for this," to them is a privilege, because I'm not even sure that a lot of them understand or are able to identify some of the more complex things that they feel. So they inherited certain tendencies. They were raised in homes where their own pain was never acknowledged, because in a lot of situations, survival was the main thing that was attended to at any given time. You have food on your table. You've eaten. Your belly is full. For them, for someone to come back home and find food to eat in the kind of culture and systems that they had, that was the thing you must inherently be grateful for. Your stomach is full, because it takes a full stomach to begin to think of other things. And these other things that you consider to be so important to them is a privilege because, oh, you've eaten enough now and your stomach is full and you're now exploring other things. They did not have that privilege. So I think it's important that we understand that in a lot of situations, this is just what it was. Outside of this, almost all the tribes that I know in this country also have a thing around respect in their culture. It creates a very strong hierarchy. Even outside of colonialism, it creates a very strong hierarchy and almost creates this system that makes it very possible for a lot of older people to navigate the world with like a godlike complex. You would even sometimes hear people say things like, oh, by the time they get to this age, nobody can question them. There is a strong hierarchy and we are conditioned to expect like people to start deferring to us a particular way once we get to a certain age, regardless of whether or not it is deserved. And this culture also makes it very clear that apologizing to a child or anyone who has come from you or who is beneath you technically, it's like losing the whole structure. It's almost an abomination, like it's not possible. Why would you apologize to someone? Why would you even acknowledge that you've harmed someone like that? There's so many things in our traditions and in our cultures that hold these things in place. And sometimes it can be really bad. It's the reason why people can do a lot of horrible things when they're much younger. And the way cultures and traditions are set up and shaped, it just really cushions them from all of it. It's the reason why someone can do really horrible things to their children when they were much younger, maybe abandon them. And then you come into situations where you see that family members, young people, they call for a meeting when they're advocating that you just let somebody who basically almost in some situations killed you people to please pity for them because they are now old. There's also a lot of this that flows into even the way that our politics is set up, but that's not what we're talking about. But I'm trying to explain to you guys that these are the things that we have in place that make the situation the way that they are. I feel like in most parts of the world and in a lot of cultures that we have, it's almost an unwritten rule that once somebody reaches a certain age, you can never say they've done anything wrong. And in a lot of situations, it's people that are around that age group that are causing a lot of harm, truth be told. They are causing harm, but it's almost like it's now an abomination to point out the fact that they are making errors, you know? Colonial systems played a huge role. I completely agree. For them to be able to hold people back the way that they did, prevent uprisings, make sure that things played out the way that they wanted them to, make sure that there is no dissent, they had to create a structure that didn't entertain questions, didn't entertain autonomy, didn't entertain feelings, didn't entertain you sharing experiences and having those experiences validated or even highlighting how you felt. And a lot of the people in that generation, a lot of boomers, this part of the world, inherited some of those things and just considered them fact and moved along. So it also just brings context because when you think about it, you realize that the parents that you are actually interacting with were raised in these type of classrooms. They went to churches where they interacted with these type of people and just situations that had these types of rules and regulations. The tragedy is that you see a lot of institutions, a lot of schools, even in a lot of organizations in this country. And I know that this is a similar thing for a lot of other Africans who, the way they run these institutions, the way that structure and hierarchy is, I don't even think that it's very natural to us, but it's very, very natural to the way that the white man showed it ought to be before they left. Another very, very important point to highlight when it comes to this is that we belong to cultures a lot of the time where there's a transactional ledger with the way that parents see children. I think that this one is also very, very important. And this is the reason why even in this day and age, you find that a lot of parents had children, or even when grandparents are having, or your parents are having conversations around you having children, you see that it's rarely sometimes ever because of the joy that children bring or because there is a human need to nurture someone. I think that a lot of the language sometimes is very selfish. And this is the reason why I think that in this day and age, you will still hear grown adults, like grown people, talking about children in a way that is almost like it's a gamble, or they're like a plan, a retirement plan that they have with the hopes of like, oh, is this one that will end up like dragging us? This particular one will drag us out of poverty, you know? So I'll just keep having, at least if I have 10, one of the 10 would be the one to change our lives. You know, one of the 10 would be the one to grow up and then raise the whole family. When we talk about like parenting and having children, there is a way that I think it ought to go, in the sense that you have children to provide for them. But a lot of times this part of the world, you will still hear people talking about children as if they are having the children so that the children at the end of the day raise them. And that's why you would see people, when there is something amiss and they're talking about some of the things that they had to endure, you will see that if a child is just smart, the amount of burden that is just heaped on them from very early on, if they are beautiful, the expectations sometimes for the girl child, oh, they will marry a rich man that will drag us out of poverty. They will do this to do this for us. They will go to school and graduate to do this for us. They will do this and that to do this for us. And so the expectation is crazy. So when you're also having children from this angle, some of the finer things, some of the more important things are lost. Like, they're just lost in the midst of all of it, because you're not talking about someone looking at you as a specific full individual with specific types of needs. Whereas, like, their hopes and aspirations when it came to you in so many ways pertain to themselves as well. You will hear people, and this was very prevalent in our parents' generations. Boomers did this a lot, where I'm just going to have as many children as possible so that my chances of having a better life towards my later years improve, because at least one of them is going to make things easier for me. You know, children were almost like seeds that were sown. And this is still a very big thing in the way some cultures look at children to this day. So the way this culture is set up, it goes across different tribes in this country. Children are not necessarily what you have from a place of wanting to nurture and give a better life and upbringing that you had. And even if, yes, that is part of it, a big part of it as well is banking on them being grateful enough, or just so grateful that they carry a lot of weight for you at a point. And I think that in so many ways, this type of thinking is unfair, but we're not going to fixate on that too much. But I'm also saying all of this to give you guys context as to why I think that things are kind of the way that they are. For a lot of people, this is the case. You know, children are seen as things you have as an extension of yourself, to better yourself, to increase your chances at something. And that's also the reason why I feel like African parents or Nigerian parents take a lot of things you choose to do for yourself so personally. You know, you decide to get a tattoo. How dare you do this to me? You decide to grow out your hair. How dare you do this to me? You decide to wear something. How dare you do this to me? Because you're an extension of them to a degree. Like, I hope that this is making sense, but the thinking around it is that you are just an extension of themselves. And when you now begin to make arguments for your own individuality, it is so confusing to them. And it is because of what was even the premise of them having you. So if that's the initial mentality from the beginning, it's very, very difficult for a lot of the things that are the main topic of this video to occur to a parent as the going gets going. You know, religion also played a huge role. I cannot not bring that up, but religion did play a huge role with the way these things were, because even in certain institutions, certain things were not allowed, certain things were not tolerated. I also know that sometimes when people are listening to people talk, they are not able to actually understand what the angle is. So someone might be looking at this video now and be like, oh, why are you just bashing parents? That's not what I am doing. What I've done now is give you guys context that is very, very important for some of the other things that will now follow that I'm about to say after this part, okay? You understanding something does not mean that you are condemning it. You can also condemn and understand. I feel like the two can go side by side. But you get what I'm saying? I just hope that we're all on a straight line at this point and everybody's understanding me. I know that some of you are probably also going to say, oh, but our parents did their best. They did their best. And I completely agree that they did their best for a lot of them, with the resources that they had. But I think that one thing that a lot of people would say is that they just hope that they were a little bit more open-minded. You know, especially at this stage, because the world has changed so much. It's one thing doing your best, going by what you've experienced and what you know, but being very open-minded and being conscious of the generation you've had children in is also very important. I also touched on this in the video that I did about lies that society told us, and it's parenting as compensation. It's very, very important that for whatever generation that you have children in, you have to understand the generation that your children are in. And that would actually help you, give you context as to how to navigate parenting for them. Because you cannot raise a child going by the way you were raised. You cannot expect your child, after you've given them maybe certain things that you don't have, just to be automatically grateful for things that you didn't have, like they were not you. So it's important that you look at the children and understand what their specific needs are. I think that I had to repeat this point. It's very important. Considering the lack that I've just explained, for a lot of us in our generation, we saw this as, we're just going to give you material things we didn't have, send you to good schools, put you in environments that we never had access to, make sure that you get into certain rooms. But a lot of things that pertain to the well-being of a child, they are typically always dismissed or not even considered. They cannot even comprehend why these are needs that you now have, or why these are feelings that you now feel. Because I didn't feel this, so why is it a problem for you? That's typically not how parenting should work. It's one thing to not know out of ignorance because you just didn't know that this was a need. So I just didn't anticipate that this is a need that you would have. But it's one thing, especially with boomers, that when you're trying to give context and explain why certain things matter, it's always like you're talking to a brick wall. People, they're just... I don't know, because I was just reading a thread on Threads today about this, and this was an American woman even talking about this. Like, it's very difficult. It's just very difficult sometimes getting them to understand certain concepts. And I really wish that a boomer who is watching this video can explain why this is, because it would really help us a lot. It's not an attack to name things. We come from a culture where sometimes we feel like whenever you try to name anything or label it or unpack something, it's almost like you're insulting the thing or you're condemning the thing. That's not what that is. And I feel like this is going to be the second and last time I'm going to say this in this video, because it's very important that we also bear this in mind while we watch this video. So the next thing is, what does it do to us to be raised by the kind of people that we've just kind of described? What does it do to us to come from situations where we experience the things that I've just explained? Sometimes we become people who over-apologize for everything. Even our own existence, we're apologizing for it, for taking up space, for having needs, for wanting things. You come across a lot of millennials or just younger people that before they say anything, they'll say sorry first. Sorry, please, can you explain to me why? Sorry, please, can I go and ease myself? Sorry, please. I know so many millennials that everything, or just younger people, sorry, please, that's how we start our sentences. I think, however, that the level of the sorry, please is a Nigerian thing, right? In situations where we feel like we're dealing with people who are a bit older than us. I don't know, maybe we're conditioned to start sentences like that. But even in school, this was prevalent. Like in school, you want to take permission from your teacher. Sorry, please, ma, can I go and, I think that it just stems from us also just being very anxious people sometimes, especially for women too. In situations like this, we're just very, very anxious, and we're typically sometimes even scared of wanting something that is contrary to what an older person wants. It just breeds anxiety for people on the other end of it, which is us. Another very negative side effect of being raised in an environment where your hurts are never acknowledged is that you struggle to receive apologies too. You wave everything off. You minimize your own hurts. Nothing ever hurts you. Okute nkume. You're never hurt. If somebody is trying to say, oh, I know this thing might have hurt you, you go, oh, me? No. How can it hurt me? You don't know who I am. It's not like you're not hurt, but it's almost like you acknowledging and admitting that you were hurt is a problem on its own. We find it very, very difficult to acknowledge that certain things have made us feel a specific type of way. There's also chronic guilt. The truth is that you grow up in a dynamic where your parents are never wrong. So if you grow up in an environment with people who are never wrong, it now means that you're always wrong. For a lot of people, that's actually how the brain processes it. Every interaction with that parent or that elder or that older person ends up making you feel like you've been beaten down, like you have to accept their angle, and that follows you for the rest of your life a lot of the time. You find people who are just avoidant. They never want to try to explain themselves to people. They never want to get into any kind of... It doesn't even need to be an argument or a back and forth, but they never feel the need to explain their own sides. Like you can just dismiss them completely. They don't care, because it's like the energy that it would take. Something fundamentally in them just runs from having to stand up for themselves. Another big side effect is being drawn to partners who don't apologize. Sometimes sometimes you just find that you've ended up with someone who does the exact same thing that older people in your life did, that frustrated the living daylights out of you. And sometimes it's actually our bodies and minds, like our brains, being unconsciously drawn to things that it considers familiar, no matter how bad they are. And at the end of the day, you see that you're repeating the same cycle that you were supposed to end. And you begin to realize, oh my God, this person is exactly what I wanted to avoid. That's one other big side effect that is actually more common and people don't talk about it enough. Another side effect is just finding that you are constantly over explaining. You soften your feedback. You never push back. You don't ask for a raise at work. You don't explain how you feel about something. Even when somebody is asking you, you're so scared to explain how you feel. You develop a very anxious attachment style. And as a result, because you're constantly worried about how you are perceived or who you could be hurting, you just find that you're constantly stressed. Because it's a lot of mental load for one person to carry, constantly thinking like this. I remember just before I got married to my husband, because we dated for like a year and a few months, and I had this elder. So we're just going to say that this is an elder, like this is an older person in my life. It wasn't my parents though, it wasn't either of my parents, but this was an older person in my life. And I remember this person being so sure that my husband was wasting my time. It was such a confusing thing. And it was also very, very hurtful because I had let this person in on the relationship like very early on. But then they became very, very critical of everything. And they became very critical of everything because their whole thing was that, in their time, that a man who loves a woman does not date the woman for more than 3 months. That if a man is trying to date you for more than 3 months before marrying you, then something is wrong. That's how it was done in their own time. And I remember constantly trying to explain that I wouldn't even want to marry somebody in under a year, because if you met me and you're trying to get married to me in under a year, the first thing that my brain is asking me is, what are you hiding? What do you want to rush quickly and hide so that I don't discover it? This was the basis of constant back talk, and it was such a very frustrating thing for me to experience. The last heated conversation I remember having with this person, right? I remember explaining the same thing over and over and over again, and they kept on repeating the same thing that at that point they had repeated quite a few times over and over again. It got a bit heated because I was like, you need to stop doing this because I don't particularly like it, and I'm trying to tell you that you're hurting my feelings by doing it. Then the minute I even brought that up, it now turned into, you're accusing me of so and so. It was a very confusing conversation because this is somebody who has not done anything to you, not done anything problematic. There's nothing that you can hold and say that they did. The only problem that you had with them was that they were dating me for longer than you believe a man should date a woman. It was just a very hurtful conversation because I realized that no matter how I tried to explain it, this person wasn't listening to me. And then I remember that conversation ended. 2 weeks later, my husband proposed to me. As of the time that we were having that conversation, I didn't even know that my husband had gone to ask my parents for my hand in marriage, like ask for permission to propose to me, and they gave their blessings. I didn't even know. And 2 weeks after that, when I got proposed, this person never congratulated me. They never also called back to apologize for some of the things that they had said and for how much I had communicated that it was most likely hurting me. After a while, I just realized that the apology was probably never going to come and that I would have to heal from that conversation myself and not let it stress me. And that's what I had to choose to do. But it's this constant work that a lot of people have to do, to act like something that hurt them didn't necessarily hurt them and just move on with their lives. I'm sharing this to explain and to kind of emphasize some of the things that I'm saying in this video, and so that you know that there are so many levels to this and that a lot of us can actually relate to it. And so for everyone who has now listened to me and is wondering, how do we break this cycle? How do we ensure that it doesn't happen again? The first thing I would say is to try to apologize. Start practicing it. Apologize to your kids, apologize to your siblings, apologize to your friends, apologize to your partners. Be loud and very specific about the things you apologize for too. Do not give vague apologies. Give apologies that are heartfelt. Do not act like certain things did not happen, because that is very triggering for a lot of people, I feel like, in our generation. Even if it was never your intention, say it was never your intention and apologize, first of all, for making the person feel the way that they did, and then explain that it was never your intention. And then go on ahead to assure them that you would not do what you did again. Trust me, nobody's going to die. It's very important that we apologize and we learn to navigate the whole thing with nuance and context. It's also important that you try gently with your parents or the elders in your life. Try to get them to understand and accept what they are not apologizing probably did to you. It may not land, and that's the honest to God truth. In a lot of cases, it will not. And that is a grief that a lot of people have to live with. I'm saying that it is a grief because sometimes I feel like we also don't want to acknowledge the fact that it is a grief and that it is okay to grieve it. Therapy is a very good way to unpack these things. Prayer is also highly recommended, right? Because there are certain hurts that I feel like God and prayer can resolve, just give you peace. But what I also want to tell you is that grieving the absence of it is normal. Like grieving the absence of an apology, grieving the absence of validation, it's also very normal. The grief of an apology that is never coming, we are actually allowed to mourn it. The whole thing of, I don't feel anything. It's okay. I didn't expect anything from them anyways. Like, it's okay to not expect anything from someone, but then again, you're still hurt that they didn't even surprise you. It's okay to grieve it. In my opinion, it's okay to say I had expected it, I had hoped that it would be different this time, and then you just try to figure out a way to navigate it. Also forgive yourself. I think that this one is very important because sometimes I think that we beat ourselves up for the roles that we played when things like this happen. Reconciliation requires two people, and sometimes we get worked up about things we could have done to prevent certain outcomes, but sometimes the things that you're worried about are just out of your power. So stop overanalyzing everything. You don't need to overanalyze everything. Give yourself grace and also forgive yourself. And finally, please stop apologizing for your own existence. You did not kill anybody. Let other people's sorry land. A lot of us find it extremely difficult to accept apologies. Even me, it's not the easiest thing for me, I'm not going to lie. Sometimes someone will try to apologize. You'll be like, okay, it's fine, don't worry. Sometimes it's okay to just sit down, stare them in the eyeballs while they are apologizing. When they are done, say, thank you for apologizing. I really appreciate that. I needed that. It's okay. There's no need to act like you did not even deserve the apology in the first place. I'm still learning to be good at this, and I'd highly recommend that you try it too. So, the truth is that a lot of our parents were not monsters. They're all just products of their own environment. They were shaped by systems that hurt them first and molded them before we even came into the picture in a lot of cases. And human beings sometimes don't know how to untie. They don't know how to untie or unravel knots that they've tied so tightly. Behaving the way that they do when it comes to things that require vulnerability or emotions is actually very abnormal. It means that at certain points in their lives, they literally sealed those parts of them off and threw the key away, They feel sometimes like vulnerability is them exposing themselves to flames, like burning them up. Sometimes if you actually hear them explaining what vulnerability feels like, you'll be shocked. So I think that for a lot of them, finding themselves in situations that would make them rethink and offer something they thought was not necessary to someone's well-being or development in the first place, something they've buried deep down, it becomes incredibly difficult. I believe, however, that we can be the generation that breaks this cycle. I completely believe this. So just try. I feel like understanding, accepting, and figuring out how to navigate is like a very good place to start. I would really love to hear from people who grew up in the environments where things like this was very normal, like the outliers. I really want to know what the experience of a parent who constantly validated your feelings or apologized all the time, what that was like for you. But if you're someone who has never consistently experienced something like this, what would you want an apology to sound like? What would you want it to be? Let me know in the comment section. Let's have a conversation around this. I love you guys, and I'll see you in my next one.